Apple manipulates their customers. And at this point, we all know it. Do you really think this wasn't planned? As one philosopher once said, them green bubbles are turn off. Apple has done one thing really well. They've made themselves a cool brand. That's why 87% of teens in the US today have an iPhone. But just like the popular kids in 7th grade, you have to be a bit manipulative in order to become cool. Sometimes it's making Android text an ugly green. Other times it's making older phone models die out just as a new phone is being released. Apple is undeniably cutthroat in their efforts to make themselves the coolest brand. You're not crazy for thinking that green texts on an iPhone screen are ugly to look at. It's because colour psychology is real and corporations take advantage of it. 85% of consumers claim that colour is a primary draw to their purchasing, which is how experts found that each colour brings a different emotion. Red encourages appetite. Orange promotes enthusiasm. Purple is associated with royalty. Apple's aware of this, which is why they use blue and green masterfully. When an iPhone sends a message to another iPhone, it comes up as blue. Experts say that blue is associated with calm, peacefulness, honesty, and communication. But when a message is sent from Android to an iPhone, it comes up as green. Yes, green can be associated with wealth, for example, but how about the fluorescent green that arises from Android texts? The putrid green? Experts associate that colour with jealousy. An Apple engineer said at a conference in 2014 that Android users were green bubble friends in a condescending tone and that they have inferior devices. All of this isn't by random chance. Beyond colour psychology, Apple uses middle school playground psychology to drive revenue and build out a cultish following for their products, and it's worked for 20 years. iMessage was launched in 2011 in order for Apple users to seamlessly chat with one another. This was a genius move on Apple's part. Let Apple users connect and interact with each other using a unique and slick interface, hence developing an exclusive in-group. Making the Apple in-group with competitors being the out-group is everything to their revenue. That's why Apple has been able to make bold moves that no other company has been able to make. When iOS 14 was released in 2020, Apple was praised for allowing users to opt out of apps tracking their every move. This was Apple taking a stand against the controversial practices of Facebook and other tech companies that fully stalk the user. Now, let's be honest, Apple didn't do this because they're a company built on impeccable morals. They did this to further their customer loyalty. Apple doesn't need to rely on selling user data. 225 million iPhones were sold in 2022. Their customer loyalty is in a league of its own, which was won through their long history of strategic and deliberate branding. The 1980s print campaigns of Garden of Eden and Benjamin Franklin set the stage for their identity. Apple was cool and different, while other tech companies were nerdy, boring, and lacked creativity. This message was furthered in their famous 1984 ad, showing how Apple fights against a sheep-like mentality. The 1990s saw the Think Different commercial campaigns, showing how Apple was the company for people who could think bigger and better than the ordinary Joe. While the ads were always about being different and straying away from the pack, there's one semi-cringy ad campaign that forever cemented the us versus them mentality.
Hello, I'm a Mac.
And I'm a PC.
The I'm a Mac and I'm a PC advertisement was the perfect embodiment of a snarky, elitist attitude towards those outside of the Apple clique. Critics of the ad said, "Isn't smug superiority, no matter how affable and casually dressed, a bit off-putting as a brand strategy?" Evidently not, because it laid the groundwork for the green text equals bad framing that we see today. Apple ownership is an exclusive group. Anyone outside of this group? Laugh at them. Fast forward to today. To nobody's surprise, Apple is the preferred hardware of Gen Z, with 88% owning an iPhone. Current teens rank Apple as one of their most beloved brands, just as millennials did a few years prior. Where's the problem? If you're a devout follower to a company like Apple, that company will take advantage of your loyalty. This is why iPhones purposefully die out. Customers have long observed that when a new iPhone is released, their older model suddenly stops working. Some claim this was a tinfoil hat conspiracy theory.
Being run by an ancient, powerful entity with super advanced intelligence.
But in 2020, this was all confirmed to be true. Apple had to pay out $113 million to settle the fraud lawsuits over allegations that they secretly slowed down old iPhones. They first denied this for years, claiming that it was completely untrue, but when the courts got involved, they shared the reality. Apple slowed down batteries, but only did so to preserve battery life. They offered a cute apology. We have never and would never do anything to intentionally shorten the life of any Apple product or degrade the user experience to drive customer upgrades. The typical life cycle of an iPhone is 2 years, meaning every 2 years, customers tend to upgrade. This is where the Apple clique becomes more of the Apple cult, best described by Fortnite's Apple parody. Apple has branded themselves as, "We are the good guys against the bad guys." But as Epic Games pointed out, Apple themselves might be the bad guy due to their price control of the App Store. When the App Store was introduced in 2008, it was by no means meant to be a cash cow. Steve Jobs said, quote, "We don't expect this to be a big profit generator." Fast forward today, the majority of Apple's subscription revenue comes from the App Store, generating over $10 billion a year. How'd they accomplish this? By building an App Store monopoly. Apple takes a 30% cut from developers, even when goods are purchased inside of a free app. That means when an app user buys an add-on to a game, Apple earns big. Every tech company under the sun, Epic Games, Spotify, Netflix, have all raised a similar concern about Apple. They have an obvious monopoly with their App Store. Worst of all for these companies, there's not too much they can do. If you scroll through Spotify's audiobook selection and tap to make a purchase, you're met with, "Want to listen? You can't buy audiobooks in the app. We know it's not ideal." If you want to make a donation to a small business on Facebook, you receive the message, Apple takes 30% of this purchase. These tech companies aren't saints by any means. You shouldn't feel bad for them. But who really gets hurt here? It's the consumer. Apple's cut leaves only two unfortunate options for app developers. One, the companies such as Netflix won't allow the user to make purchases or subscriptions through the app, or two, the user gets upcharged in order to make up for Apple's 30%. This means that Apple customers are either deprived of a full experience through the app or charged more in order to pay Apple. The iPhone has a market share of 57% in America. You can't grow a tech company without having an app, and you also can't use any other payment processor aside from Apple's for the App Store. Where will this lead? Apple's revenue has been steadily increasing year over year, and the App Store has been a significant contribution. So what happens in, say, 2025, when shareholders pressure Apple for higher revenue? With one move, they can choose to change the rules with the App Store to drive more profits, even if it means that you, the customer, have to pay more. And there's nothing anyone will be able to do. That's a monopoly for you. One company having a scary level of control. Does Apple really have the consumer's best interest at heart? They've built a brand on being the good guy in a sea of bad actors within the tech world. But what have they really accomplished? Making an exclusive in-group that acts more like a cult than a clique.